say, what about horse evolution? Yes, boys and girls, you see this? The four-toed horse evolved to the one-toed horse. That's a lie, proven wrong 55 years ago.
Spoiler alert, no it wasn't. But I also have to clarify that all mammals started out pentadactyl, meaning that we started with 5 digits. And some lost the thumb and were reduced to only 4, which is what happened to the front feet of the earliest horses, while the back feet lost the pinky finger too, leaving them with only 3 toes there. Then, because genetics usually follows a pattern, front feet eventually followed suit. And of course, in the case of horses, they eventually lost the other peripheral toes too and were down to 1. So that horses, rhinos, tapirs, and calyptires, these awkward-looking things that are now extinct, are all perissodactyls, odd-toed ungulates, as distinguished from pigs, deer, cattle, camels, and giraffes, who are all artiodactyls, or even-toed ungulates, having usually 4 toes on cloven hooves, except for camels, who lost a couple more toes along the way. Artiodactyls and perissodactyls split a long time ago, just before the demise of the dinosaurs, when neither one looked like what we think of them as today. The morphological link between them is Eohippus, formerly known as Hyraxes.
The Hyrax is the so-called four-toed horse. They're still alive today in Africa and Turkey. There's still a little bitty critter. There's one right there, a Hyrax.
This preacher is so confused. Do these look like the same animal to you? One looks like a small deer and the other looks like a fat hamster. No one ever thought that these were closely related. The preachers somehow got Hyraxes, which is named after the Hyrax, confused with a Hyrax. That's like thinking that a sea lion is really a lion, or that a koala bear is a species of bear. No. No one ever said that the Hyrax was the dawn horse. The word Hyraxes means Hyrax-like beast because someone thought it was like a Hyrax. It had 4 toes on the front feet and only 3 in the back. And that configuration is very rare. I think there's only one other animal like that. The Hyrax has the same thing. So the guy who discovered Hyraxes said, this feature reminds me of a Hyrax, so I will call my fossil a Hyrax-like beast. He thought it was like a Hyrax. He didn't think that it was a Hyrax.
They don't tell you the early horse had 18 pairs of ribs, the next one had 15. These animals are not even related.
That's right, they're not. Well, very distantly. The Hyrax is an Afrothere, a group of mammals that includes everything from elephants to aardvarks that all evolved in Africa. They and xenarthrans, who evolved in South America, are both in the clade Atlantogenata, whereas horses are in another branch, Boreoeutherians, like we are, except that horses are on the opposite sub-branch from us. They are Laurasiatherians, and horses specifically evolved in North America. Then they went extinct here, along with most of the American megafauna at the end of the last ice age. But before that happened, one group of them made it to Asia, taking advantage of lower sea levels and the movement of tectonic plates. And every breed of horse we have in the world today descends from that Asiatic ancestor. So horses are about as far removed from the Hyrax as is possible for a placental mammal to be.
They just picked some bones and put them in order they wanted them.
No, it is not even possible to do that. And because science is all about investigative inquiry, with everyone trying to disprove everyone else, then if someone did do that, someone else would figure that out and expose them.
The next one had 19 and then back to 18.
Here's the skeleton of Hyraxes, which they don't even call it that anymore because it's nothing like a Hyrax. It's called Eohippus now, which means the dawn horse. And they had 16 pairs of caged ribs plus 2 pair of floating ribs, which may not appear in every fossil because the caged ribs are anchored to each other. So 18 pairs of ribs in all. And this is the next one, Mesohippus, which means middle horse. And they had 18 pairs of ribs too, just like modern horses do. Although Arabian horses only have 17, and some horses can have as many as 19. Even though they're all the same species and still alive today. But on average, modern horses have the same number of ribs as Mesohippus, the same as Eohippus. And so the preacher is wrong about that too, just like he usually is. Which is the only thing I find really impressive about creationists, especially these anti-science apologists. It's how anyone can be so consistently proven to be absolutely wrong about absolutely everything 100% of the time for such a long time and still believe theirs is the absolute truth, even when there's no truth to it at all, and we can all see that. But just to show that the preacher is always wrong all the time, let's look at a skeleton of the Hyrax. Now we see 20 pairs of ribs, and Google says there's another pair there that we can't see in this picture. That's 5 or 6 more than the horses had throughout their whole evolution. And the Hyrax ribs are of a different type, too. That's why no evolutionary scientist ever linked the Hyrax with horses.
This horse evolution theory was proven wrong a long time ago.
No, it really wasn't. In fact, it's always only ever been reconfirmed by new methods evidencing their original pentadactyly.
There's a whole variety of horses today, by the way, big ones and little ones. But back in 1950, G.G. Simpson, a famous evolutionist, said, this horse evolution was unintentionally falsified. It's not true.
You know, of all the times that the preacher has misquoted someone saying things they didn't really say or think or mean, this is probably my favorite. Because the preacher got it so completely wrong on multiple levels. He cites Evolutionary Determinism and the Fossil Record by George Gaylord Simpson. It was an article featured in the Scientific Monthly way back in October of 1950. So I contacted JSTOR, who graciously granted me access to that article. And while the selected sentence is there, the surrounding context shows that it doesn't say or mean what the preacher wants you to think it does. As the title implies, the article is talking about deterministic evolution according to 2 extreme views that people used to have back then. Those who thought that evolution was an entirely random process, and those who believed in orthogenesis, that evolution must be absolutely deterministic, as if our evolution was guided by God for a predetermined purpose. This may be a little bit hard to understand because those people are all dead now and nobody thinks that way anymore. But the nice thing about reading science articles from decades or centuries ago is that you find out that people used to believe all these crazy things that sound absurd to us now. For example, the article says that many agreed with Laplace that if we knew all about the universe at any given moment, we could predict exactly what would happen forever after. And this is the view of most God believers. But if this was true, then free will could not logically exist. The article continues, everyone knows that the physical scientists are no longer convinced of the universality of absolute determinism. Indeterminacy has crept in at multiple levels. And it gives the example that gas laws may be merely statistical. And it goes on to explain that evolution might be determined, that is, completely caused in a materialistic way, and yet not rigidly predetermined from the first as to which course it was to follow. Then, too, there is the possibility that evolution is partly deterministic, partly not. It may combine physiochemical determinacy with biological indeterminacy. To illustrate what he's talking about, in the previous video of this series, I showed Rudy Zallinger's iconic painting, March in Progress, which shows human evolution according to the orthogenetic view. And while this image does show that evolution is an accumulation of subtle incremental changes over generations rather than an abrupt transformation of different kinds, and it has become the poster image to depict evolution, it's also wrong because not all of the depicted characters are in succession. The orthogenetic view is that every intermediate exists as a means to an end, the purpose being to achieve the ultimate form, which of course is what we assume modern man to be. But if some of these guys, Neanderthals and Paranthropines and others, were not ancestors but were instead offshoots who ultimately went extinct, then their existence is deemed meaningless, as the orthogenetic view is invalidated. And likewise, horse evolution was also commonly depicted as a single lineage, where every fossil form was part of a linear development toward the intended goal, the modern horse. And it's easy to see why. Because as we move through time, these species do get progressively bigger and their peripheral toes dwindle and disappear. But this too is wrong because evolution is a branching tree pattern and that applies to the horse family tree as well. Pliohippus had subtle deviations in its teeth and skull that are easily acquired by descent with inherent modification. But those subtle differences should have been retained in the next evolutionary stage too. They wouldn't revert back to the original form. And that implies that Pliohippus is an offshoot, not part of an orthogenetic procession. The article explains that by saying that orthogenetic evolution is supposed to proceed undeviatingly in a single direction, regardless of environment, organic activity, or such factors as natural selection. There is at present a clear consensus of paleontologists that orthogenesis in this sense is not real. There is no known sequence in the fossil record that requires or substantiates such a process. Many examples commonly cited, such as the evolution of the horse or the saber-toothed tigers, can be readily shown to have been unintentionally falsified and not to be really orthogenetic. All supposed examples are more simply and fully interpreted as due to some other cause, such as natural selection. The preacher's own quote even says that horse evolution was shown not to be orthogenetic. But he didn't read that part because he doesn't know what it means. So the article says that horse evolution cannot be explained by orthogenesis because there are side branches, but it can be explained by natural selection. And just to make that a bit more clear, the next paragraph says the fossil record definitely does not accord with the particular sort of rigid determinism that has come to be associated with the concept of orthogenesis, or more broadly, with overtly or covertly non-materialistic theories. And this passage applies to creationism as we know it today. Now, at some point, some science-denying, biblical literalist wanna-believer read all of this and selected just that one sentence by itself because, taken out of context, it seems to say that horse evolution was disproved. But anyone who sees the rest of the paragraph knows that it doesn't imply that at all. So do you think that whoever mined that one sentence by itself didn't notice what the other sentences said immediately before and after it? Of course they noticed that. They had to. It's moments like this when you realize that whoever did that couldn't possibly be that obtuse. They're either incompetent and don't understand what they're reading, or, and this is far more likely, they did that on purpose to mislead and deceive their believing sheep, meaning you.
The evolution of the horse was all wrong.
I'm going to speak directly to the preacher now. Look at this mind quotation. Notice the ... where something was cut out? When we look up Science News for August 25th, 1951, we find this tiny article that says, the early classical evolutionary tree of the horse, beginning with the small dog-sized Eohippus and tracing directly, that's the key word, to our present-day equinus, was all wrong, because it wasn't direct, meaning that it wasn't linear. It says that horses really did evolve, but in a branching tree pattern, where there were offshoots with finite stages and blind alleys. In other words, in accordance with natural selection as opposed to orthogenesis.
It never happened in nature.
Your next mind quotation is from George Gaylord Simpson's book, Life in the Past, also from the early 1950s. That one's not available online, so I had to go to the university library to find it. Your citation says to look on page 119, but it's not there. It's on page 125. And, oh look, it's talking about orthogenesis again. And looking at the rest of the paragraph, it clearly says that horses didn't evolve orthogenetically, they evolved organically according to the branching tree pattern of natural selection. But you took just part of that to make it sound like it said that horses didn't evolve at all. Anyone looking at the original text would know that's not what it said. It says that they definitely did evolve. So whoever took that one sentence out of context had to know how misleading that would be, which is obviously why they did it.
Horse evolution has not held up under close examination.
This mind quotation came from a biology text from 1992, wherein your audience is supposed to believe what you keep telling them, that horses never evolved and that their evolution had been disproved. But the use of the word gradual here implies that this article is really an argument for evolution via punctuated equilibrium. Sadly, I can't get a hold of that textbook, so there's no way for me to verify that.
But I happen to have a copy of this book, and not just that book, but specifically the 1992 edition that you cite. And so I know for a fact that it disagrees with you completely. Wow, you know, it's sure nice when I'm able to track down your ancient and obsolete sources, since I can unambiguously state that you're wrong. Tell me, what's this a picture of on page 315? Well, I guess that's a picture of the four-toed Orohippus, which isn't a difficult guess to make since that's what the caption says it is. Oh, and what's this on page 297? Why, that's the book flat out stating that the horse's ancient ancestors had 5 toes. And what's this on page 304? Oh hey, that's your quote mine! But it says something about the gradual evolution of the horse not holding up, and a punctuational model? Whatever could that mean? Oh look, this is helpful. Here's a modified tree of life from the previous page showing evolution under a gradual and a punctuational model. And here's page 303 talking about gradualism. Well gee, that's sure not enough information for little old me to figure out what's being referred to after all your Stephen Jay Gould quote mines about gradualism and punctuated equilibrium in the last video. Pfft. If you're gonna only look for sources that you think agree with your opinion, at least pick ones that actually agree with your opinion.
The whole idea was made up by Othniel Marsh back in 1874. He picked animals from all over the world and put them in order the way he wanted it to happen.
Wrong. The preacher's mispurporting purported facts again. He has just made an untrue statement, pure fabrication, creating a false or misleading impression, one that is unsupported by anything and is contradicted by all the available evidence. Othniel Marsh traveled the world in his youth, but he found all of his fossils here in the U.S., and always in their proper order in the geologic column.
He never found him in that order, okay?
Wrong again. Marsh named Eohippus after the Eocene, Myohippus after the Miocene, and Pliohippus after the Pliocene. And while he did get one of those dates wrong, we know because scientists check into each other that way, that is still the sequential order in which he found these.
Modern horses are found in the same layers as the so-called ancient horse.
No, they aren't. Here, Marsh reports having found his diminutive polydactyl Eohippus in an Eocene deposit in the Rocky Mountains, strata that we now know to be 55 million years old.
The ancient horse is just an animal still alive today in Turkey and East Africa.
No, there is not now and never was any connection between the Hyrax and Hyracotherium other than the name, because the first guy who found one didn't know what it was. And the Hyrax isn't just in East Africa either. When I was in the western half of South Africa, I spooked one out of the brush while I was looking for fossils. I tell you, of all the animals in Africa that could have come charging out of the bushes, I'm glad it was that one.
The ribs, toes, and teeth are different.
Because horses and Hyrax are not in the same clade, but all of the equid fossils have a comparable complement of ribs.
In South America, the fossils are in the reverse order. Real problem. They're never found in the order presented in the textbooks.
Whether they're in North America or South America, they're always found in the same order as they're depicted in the textbooks. Once again, the preacher is saying things that are not true, not supported by anything, with no evidence to back him up, just empty assertions that are actually contradicted by all the available facts, almost as if he were just making it up as he goes along, without any regard for factual accuracy or truth by any definition.
Tulsa Zoo finally took out their display because a friend of mine wrote him a letter and said, hey, why do you have the horse evolution on display? I've got the letters here somewhere. Did you get those out, Steve? They're in the suitcase? Okay. You can come read those later. He wrote him a letter and said, guys, your horse evolution thing was proven wrong like 50 years ago. You know, would you please remove the display? And they said, we don't have the funding to remove it. So he went to a sign shop and got a bid for a sign, $60 or something, that says, we'll take this, the sign would say, we will take down this display as soon as we receive the funding, because the display is not accurate. He went into the curator at the zoo and said, here's $60 for the sign. This guy will make the sign. When would you like it delivered? He said, what's this? Oh, you're going to take down, we're going to take down the display when we get the funding. Yeah, he said, you ought to at least warn the people, you know, the display's not right. Well, they didn't take it down. Finally, I forget, 2,000 people signed a petition saying, get this thing out of our zoo. It came on the evening news, 10 o'clock one night. Tulsa Zoo has a false display. Next morning, it was gone. They found the funding. 6 months later, they put it back up.
Knowing how this preacher likes to repeat fictional stories with no truth to them, then you probably won't be surprised to find out that while creationists did produce a dubious petition against evolutionary instruction at the Tulsa Zoo, and the Institute for Creation Research claimed that the zoo bowed to their pressure by removing that exhibit, the director of the zoo says that that part never happened. They didn't take it down and put it back up again 6 months later because they never took it down at all. So while the preacher says that there was a TV news story about it, that never happened either. I'll include a link to an article by Lenny Flank revealing how all of this is just made-up malarkey.
That's a fancy word for a lie. Yale University still has their horse evolution on display, proven wrong 55 years ago.
That's because it was never proven wrong. It was compared to and contrasted with gradualism, and the old orthogenetic depiction of it was proven wrong if it includes Pliohippus in a linear sequence, which this image doesn't do. So that one's fine. And this study, which includes both North and South American intermediates, says that the original sequence of horse fossils found in the 1870s by paleontologist Othniel Charles Marsh and popularized by Thomas Huxley has been enriched by a large fossil record over the years and has now become one of the most widely known examples of macroevolutionary change. The original linear model of gradual modification, of fox-sized Hyraxes to modern forms has been replaced by a more complex tree, showing periods of explosive diversification and branch extinctions over 55 million years. And of course that part refers to punctuated equilibrium. And the fact that this is now being confirmed and improved genetically proves that the evolution of horses is a demonstrable fact and that it was not made up like this preacher wants to make you believe that it was. They did that on purpose to mislead and deceive their believing sheep, meaning you. And what do you want? Yep. You go lay down. Yep. I am recording. Okay. Just go lay down. No. Lay down. Lay down. No. I will be done soon, I promise you. Okay. And then you can all go outside and bark at possums and wake up neighbors, okay? Okay. Get down. Get down. Get down. Ow! Okay. Nope. There you go. Okay. All right. No. Not letting you out yet. I'm going to have you barking all the way through this.